Hello, everyone. This is Dave Riker, and I want to welcome you to the bonus CD of Dave Riker's Speed Seduction Technical Manual. Now, I'm really excited about this part of the product, and I'll tell you why. I've listened to a lot of products when it comes to self-help, self-improvement, different things from Ross Jeffries and other people that have taught about this in other areas of life. And I know what's happened almost every time I've listened to products like this. I listen to it, I understand the material, I learn from it, I might even be out using it. But then I think to myself, God, I really wish I could sit down with the author. I can sit down with the guy who's presenting this and ask the questions that I would like to ask. I mean, no matter how good you find this product to be, I'm sure that there's things that you want clarified in your mind, things that you wish you could sit down and ask me personally so that you have an even better understanding of this material, how to use it, and how to be more effective with it in the real world. Well, the thing is, I can't sit down with each and every one of you out there and answer every question you might have, but I think we've come up with a way to do the next best thing. On this bonus CD, what we're doing is I'm sitting here in a room with some acquaintances of mine. These are 4 guys that I know, and some of them have different levels of experience with this material. These are guys just like you. Some of them are just kind of starting off with these materials. Some of them are experts in their own right. I've got them in the room today because this is the question and answer session. They've all listened to the same product that you've just listened to. They've spent time with it. They've filled out the sections in their workbook, which I hope you guys did. That's very important that you do that. Remember, fill it out for yourself. It's going to help increase your understanding. They've all done it. Even some of these guys are experts in the field. They've done it themselves. And I know they're sitting here and they have questions they want to ask, just like you do. So this is kind of a chance for you to sit down almost as if you're sitting with me, and you're going to be able to hear them come up with the things that they're wondering, things they want a little more information on, and the things that they want to ask and just sort of have a dialogue with. I hope you're going to find this to be a really valuable addition to this product, and it's going to go a long way to increase your understanding and your effectiveness with it in the field. Now, I want to get started. We've got 4 different guys here. I want to take a brief moment to introduce them. We've got my friends Marcus, Connor, Jean-Luc, and Robert. Okay, like I said, each of these guys are here. They've got different levels of experience with the material. When we looked at the product overall, it basically went into some major sections. And the first major section, the first thing we really talked about at length was the structure of the mind. You guys all recall that, right? Okay, now I talked about the conscious and subconscious, the overall mind map, if you will. Did any of you guys have any questions about that? Anything you wanted more information on?
Well, I had a question about some perplexing behavior that girls exhibit sometimes.
All right.
When you're doing this material, they can sometimes tend to bring themselves out of state.
Right.
And they do that in various ways. But, if they feel so good, why do they bring themselves out of state? That doesn't make sense to me.
Sometimes it's a matter of the balance between them appreciating where they're at and you making sure that you have enough rapport. Remember, these are pretty powerful techniques. It's probably not very common for a woman to meet a guy and, let's say, in the course of 5-10 minutes or relatively quickly compared to most dating scenarios, it's probably not her normal course of business to feel things that powerfully that quickly. Because of that, you have to be very careful because her subconscious is trying to do what? It's ultimately trying to remember what we talked about in that, look out for her safety and security. So it's always kind of sitting there monitoring what's going on, making sure that she feels comfortable, that she feels that there's adequate security for her, and that she's able to really feel the feelings that she's having. Now, if you're having her feel really dramatic states, or very excited, very thrilled, very aroused or whatever, to do that in a relatively quick period of time is something that's probably outside her normal experience. So her subconscious is just sitting there waiting, almost looking and saying, well, is this okay? Am I safe? Is it okay to do this? It's outside of my normal experience. So, yeah, she wants to feel good, obviously. But to feel that good, you can understand how a woman would feel vulnerable to feel that good. You understand that, right? So, to that extent, there's a vulnerability there, and she's a little bit concerned about her safety, so she's always monitoring that. Some of the things you could do to help alleviate is, make sure that you've got enough rapport. That's why it's also good to work on ramping up the state. These guys that want to hit somebody with, the super duper pattern 1 minute after meeting her. Well, it's great if it works, but the problem with that is you've really got the potential to have her generate an interrupt because it's pretty dramatic pretty quickly. But if you take your time and go through certain steps to get her there, then you can have her feeling really good after 10 minutes. And the degree to which she feels good at 10 minutes is verified the fact that she felt pretty good at 8 and pretty comfortable at 6 and okay at 4 minutes. Does it kind of make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's kind of helping me understand also why fractionation is a rapport tool, which kind of confused me at first.
Right. That's a really good thing to bring up too, because remember in the context that I talked about it, fractionation is you have her experience a state, then you back off, you experience it, and you back off. You're repeatedly showing her subconscious that it's okay to feel this good. And especially if you can do what I like to do, which is to talk about these deep states and have her feel wonderful, and then back up and joke a bit. Do something funny, do something fun, use humor. Because if you're bouncing between a really deep, incredible state of connection or excitement and humor, that's really showing that this is a pretty safe situation. And again, you've got to be congruent about it too. That's very important. But if she really perceives that this is a safe situation, you're in some ways looking out for her interests as well, then she's enjoying the process. You're helping her to experience the sort of thing she's always wanted to experience. Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Okay, great. What else? Talking about the structure of mind. Does anybody else have anything, questions that they were thinking of? Yeah, it looks like Marcus has a question for us.
Yeah, Dave, I noticed in looking at the structure there that there's a lot of different aspects of the subconscious mind. So my question is, would you say that women in general are more in touch with their subconscious? And how can we, as men, use this to our mutual advantage for all parties involved?
That's a good question. I think it's really amazing that you'd ask that, because I think a lot of guys, you know how guys say they're confused, but they find women to be confusing, or the guys get sort of perplexed by the fact that women seem indecisive or they change their mind. The way most guys think, women do seem confusing, okay? But I think when you really understand how the subconscious mind works, when you have an understanding of people and of women in the sense that we've described here in the product in terms of the mind map, you can have a better appreciation for women and who they are. I think that there's some things I've heard in other contexts about women are actually wired differently anatomically than men are. The connections between their left brain and right brain are more established, so they're more able to communicate between the two hemispheres. So they're sort of, their qualitative and quantitative sides, if you will, concept we've heard before, I'm sure. Those two sides are things that are able to communicate better, okay? So I think women are more in touch with that because women more understand the concept of feelings. They act a little bit more comfortably on feelings. When you hear things about women's intuition, does that make a little more sense now? Because women are more in touch with that and able to listen to that sort of sense. They believe it. They see it as more of something that they can act upon. Men are looking for the facts and figures. They're saying, well, why should I believe this? Why should I believe that? Give me the X, Y, Z, A, B, C parts that add up to it. Women are saying, you know what? There's just something that lets me know that this is right. There's just something about this person that lets me know that he's someone I can trust. There's just something about that movie that I like or that piece of artwork. See, now in the context of the description, does that languaging that women use make more sense? Because they're describing processes in their subconscious. So yes, I think to their benefit, women are more in touch with those sort of things, okay, because of the way they're wired. We can use this to our benefit because knowing that we can have a better chance of, let's say, influencing them, but we can also use that to have a better way to make them feel wonderful. If they're more in touch with those sort of things, we sort of have an easier way to get a handle on their feelings and to make them feel great, make them experience the things they've always wanted to experience. And you don't have to look like James Bond to do it. You just have to make her feel like she's sitting next to James Bond while doing it. Does that make sense?
Right. So if I hear you correctly, by incorporating more of the vague generalities in our everyday language when we're talking to women, that seems to lend itself more to evoking some of those strong, positive feelings in them.
Yes, and the vague generalities in the context of the proper subjects. Meaning, if you just talk vague for the sake of being vague, then she's going to think vague because you're being so vague. But if you're talking about an emotional context, if you're talking about something or a subject that lends itself to wonderful feelings or powerful feelings or good feelings, then as long as you're talking about that subject, you can go ahead and be vague because she will fill in the details herself. You could talk about, an example, if you talk about what it's like to have a wonderful day. Well, she already has an idea of what a wonderful day is for her. If you sit there and say, oh, what's it like when you have a wonderful day? Like, when there's 3 football games on back to back and then there's NASCAR race. I mean, if you fill in all the blanks, now that's not most, women's idea of a wonderful day. But if you try to fill in all the blanks for her, then you've got to make sure that all the blanks that you filled in, that you exactly know what they are. But if you talk in a vague sense about what a wonderful day is, because you know that perfect day when everything goes well, you have those wonderful surprises that just make this day feel so much better. You didn't say anything specific, but she fills it in with what makes sense to her and her subconscious. And that's much better than you trying to guess whatever's in there. Okay? And this also gets into other stuff, like when you ask her questions about who she is, you can actually get that information to find out what she's thinking about. Again, to make her feel wonderful. Why not feel wonderful around you and have being with you, this is the key, being with you part of what makes her feel wonderful. Does that make sense? Okay, great. It looks like Jean-Luc has a question about the structure of the mind.
Hi, Dave.
Hey.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of things that kind of piqued my interest. One was that you really need to speak to the person in charge, and that person being the subconscious.
Like the supervisor in the department store.
Yes.
Let me speak to your leader or something. Yeah,
right.
That.
And another element is when, say someone is coming up on the street to ask you for money. Even if they don't look like a beggar, you generally have a pretty good idea what they want, even before they open their mouth. Yeah, but there's something about that, their energy or their intent or something that's being communicated. So what I want to ask you is, what is the most crucial aspect of your being, and your communication with the woman that she will perceive subconsciously that can have the effect that you want?
That's a great question. To be honest, it's the fact that for me personally, and I think this works for a lot of guys, is the fact that I have an incredible respect of women. And it's kind of ironic. Most people would think a product like this is all about manipulation. I tend to have an incredible respect and admiration for women because, as the question that came up earlier about Marcus saying about women being more in touch with their subconscious, I admire that. I admire the fact that women are able to be more in touch with that part of who they are. And plus, I really respect the fact that they need to watch out for their safety and security. I understand that sort of thing. Okay. I have women that are very good friends of mine, female friends. That's a concept that escapes a lot of guys. Okay. I understand what it's like for them to have guys come up that are being mean and manipulative. Guys that are coming off as jerks. Guys are coming up asking them for quarters or whatever. Okay. I understand where they're coming from and wanting to look out for their personal safety and their personal security. And so I have an awareness of that. So I don't want to do anything to frighten them. Okay. I may do things or talk to them in a way that they feel excited and they feel wonderful, but I understand that they want to feel safe and secure at a real deep down level. What goes hand in hand in that is I have an incredible respect for the fact that they do like to feel excited. Even that average, nice sort of girl next door wants to have exciting, wonderful, wild experiences in her life. A lot of guys have this, again, sort of an, A versus B, black versus white, 1 versus 0 view of women. And what they don't realize is even that nice, well put together, professionally dressed woman has probably a pretty wild and active, imagination. She's dreaming of meeting a fascinating guy that's going to make her feel wonderful things. I love that, and I appreciate that sort of thing. So that I don't think I'm sitting there manipulating her. I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. I think and honestly believe that most women dream about meeting this fantasy guy, this wonderful guy that's going to make them feel wonderful, fantastic things. And I get to show them how to do that. Either me personally or maybe something that I show them or describe to them makes them appreciate some other guy in their life. It doesn't matter. But the fact that I understand that they need to be safe and secure, and I respect the fact that as women, they enjoy having exciting, wild experiences, or they dream about it, or they romanticize about it. I mean, we've all heard about romance novels. We know how much women love the James Bond fantasy and the rogue and all those sort of things. I appreciate those sort of things in women. I give them all the respect that they have due. And because I have that, see, that's a frame of mind. That's an understanding that I have and a belief that I have. And because of that, they are able to perceive that sort of thing. Just like the guy walking up asking for the quarter. And before he opens his mouth, she knows. My frame walking up is, I know that you're concerned that some stranger's walking up to you. But I'm not one of the ones to be feared. I also know that there's a chance you've wondered, wouldn't it be really something to meet somebody so fascinating that I can have the kind of wonderful experience I've always wanted to happen in my life. And maybe I am the one that gets to show them that. When you've seen enough instances of that, when you've heard about it, when you've heard it discussed on products like this, and you start to believe it for yourself, that becomes more of a part of who you are. And it incredibly increases your effectiveness. Now, I know that's kind of nebulous. On some respects, maybe you're hoping for say this and say that, but remember the hierarchy of the tools, how I talked about there's the details, but then there's beliefs and stuff like that towards the top. You remember that? These are sort of the beliefs. You've hit a very powerful question, and this gets to beliefs and your attitudes about women and about how they think. And ultimately, I think this is more respectful of them because of that. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. For a minute there, I thought you were using vague language on me.
Yeah. But this does, it does get, when you're talking about beliefs, this is not about specific things. It's not about say this or say that to convince her to think that. I honestly believe those things. I have an incredible respect and admiration for women, and they pick up on that sort of stuff. That's why you don't have to lie. You don't have to, do all this stuff. They're able to perceive that. And the easiest way to get rapport is to not be putting on an act, to really be who you are. And they perceive that you're just being who you are. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. It's one of those things that you can't really see, you can't really quantify. But as you were describing it, I really thought to myself, yeah, that sounds like a very strong belief that you have.
Right.
That just gets transmitted through your vibe.
Yeah. Well, and the more you hear about it, the more you hear it described. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this product and a Q&A session. The more you hear about that sort of thing, the more it's something you can understand and believe for yourself. Mm-hmm. Great.
Cool. Thanks.
It looks like Connor, do you have a comment on that?
Well, I think this is really key, and I'm trying to understand it a little bit better. Some ideas I was having was how, a dog can smell fear. Or they can sense something, and it's kind of this sub-communication. It's like another level of communication that it's arguable whether women pick up on it more than men, I think, but they might be more in touch with that. But
maybe they just listen to it more, listen to it better.
Yeah, so it's like it comes out in your body language, maybe how fast you're walking up towards them.
Right.
Where your eyes are, your focus. I mean, who knows? But it's. Can you just elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's a great point. And you see how all this starts to interrelate back to what Marcus was saying about women being more in touch with that sort of thing. I think men probably perceive that sort of stuff too, but women probably listen to the perception a lot more. Again, subconsciously, you're able to perceive so many things on so many levels. Because remember, we talked about the fact that the subconscious is into parallel processing. It's monitoring what's going on in many senses, okay? So it's watching all those sort of things. And again, if you look at the responses and what the subconscious is doing, it almost looks, I hate to put it in this way, but it almost looks like animalistic. It's sort of the functions and things that come from the animal part of you, the protection of you as an organism, if you will. So when you look at conditions that are going to, affect your safety and security, the perceptions that are having there are things that, a dog would have, a dog being able to smell fear. a person on, we don't think in these terms, but a person being able to smell fear. Well, maybe on some level you do. Maybe as just the sort of animalistic part of ourselves or of our brain or of our mind, or subconscious, if you will, we are able to smell fear and perceive those sort of things. And she can do that sort of thing too. So you're right. It all sort of relates into that sort of stuff. And that's why if you have the belief, and ironically, the guys who really have the belief for themselves, who have, a good respect for women, or they understand that women want to have some of these experiences for themselves. If you honestly believe that for yourself, she's able to perceive that. That's also why, it's a good point. Guys say, how do I make her think that I believe this sort of thing? Have you heard that? I've had that question come up. So how do I make her think that I think this way? Well, I could sit here and say, you know what, Connor, walk up and move your hands in this way and your arms in that way and walk at this rate and move your face in this manner. You could codify it as much as you want, but the problem is she's perceiving so many things that you'd have to be this incredibly good method actor, or what do they call it, sociopathic, so that you could truly just put on any persona you wanted. You'd have to be those sort of things to put on such a good act that you can, pull one over on her. Or the best thing is to just have that frame of mind for yourself. Or to hear so many people talk about it in so many contexts that it becomes a part of your reality. Again, that's one of the reasons why we've talked about these things in the product. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Great. All right, and looks like Robert's got a couple questions or comments for us.
Yeah, we were talking about like the state of mind and stuff. How about the state of mind someone has when they're on a date? What's going on in their head there?
They're probably going, oh my God, I can't believe how expensive this dinner is. Well, again.
I love that lobster.
Part of the thing about dating too is, and we said this earlier in the product, is that a lot of the dating stuff is based on conscious mind stuff. It's, how much you can impress them. It's all the facts and figures. If you think about dating, it's about guys finding a way to say, I do this, I do that. Here's how much money I make. Here's a car I drive. Now, to some extent that works. And what's really interesting is that, remember how we talked about repetition being something that the subconscious is impressed with, okay? And it sees effort in something. Dating may be based on for a woman, evaluating a guy maybe on these quantitative things in some respects. But if it's done enough and there's enough repetition, then what happens is it becomes like a role structure in the subconscious. So the woman starts to become familiar with the role of a guy that's really fun on a date. I mean, I always joke with people about, I know how to do a good date. I know how to become the date guy. I joke about Date Man. He's like a superhero who, I know how to buy dinner. I know how to be really funny on a date. I'm Date Man. And
cape and everything.
Yeah, with a big D on the back of it and stuff. I mean, it's a role that you play. And I tell this to women. I've told this to women friends of mine. I'm like, if you want to find out what a guy is like on a date, go out on a date with him. But if you want to find out what the guy is really like, don't go out on a date with him. Because what you're seeing is how the guy acts on a date. This is why and again, this is not just me talking about giving guys advice in this community. I tell this to women too. If you really want to know what a guy's about, don't go out on a date with him. Go and spend time with him. Do something different. Do something that's not a date. If you sit to dinner in a movie, and again, you guys that are worried about falling into the wrong role, if you go to dinner in a movie, guess what? You've just fallen into the dating frame. And she's going to evaluate you based on how good you do a date. But if you go to coffee, if you do something fun, if you do something where you're talking and just opening up on different levels, then she's evaluating you in a whole different way. I can do Date Man. I mean, I'm very good at being Date Man. But after a while, it gets very tiresome because Date Man is not who I am. It's how I act on a date. So, it can be helpful. And again, if it works in your favor, if that's what you want to do, fine. But, one quick thing before I get off that subject. I know a lot of women, too, get frustrated. How many, if you guys have women friends, you've heard them talk about, oh, I went out with this guy for 2 weeks or 4 weeks and it kind of fizzled out. Well, what happened? Well, we did this, and this, but then it really seemed like it didn't go anywhere. And what happens a lot of times? They go out with them for a couple weeks, and what do? They go on dates. And as soon as it stops being about going on dates, but it starts being about them spending time together, it fizzles out. Because any guy can play date man for 2 to 3 hours. But to really be themselves and to be interesting, that's where a lot of people fizzle out. So I tell people, when I say I hate dating, it's because I don't really think dating is the way to get to know somebody. And whether it's a wild, passionate evening that you spend with a person, or whether it's somebody you're going to be with for the rest of your life, I don't think dating is the best way to go about having that start, if that makes sense. Okay.
Another thing I could think about, I got this friend Sean. He's brand new in the SS. He's just starting to learn some stuff. He was going out to a bar and he asked a girl, "Have you ever felt an incredible connection?" And she got all weirded out on him.
Did she throw the drink in his face, or did she just leave?
She just had a very reaction working. He couldn't understand what was going on. Yeah. How would you try to explain that?
It's just, at that level, he's not really engaged engaged, that's a scary word in this context for some guys. He's not really got her subconscious to really be actively involved in the process. Because he doesn't have sufficient rapport, and he just asks that very quickly. She's just giving him a very cursory, very quick response. It's the difference between when you say somebody, have you ever really felt connected with somebody? They go, yeah, I have. Well, that's sort of a trite answer. The answer is yes. But if you go, have you ever really felt connected with someone? It's just like you've known this person for a while. And they go, oh, yeah, this one friend of mine that I met in college, and it was like we've known each other for years. When they respond like that, they're emotionally engaged in the process and engaged in the answer. Your friend walking up and just blasted forth this question, she doesn't know him from Adam. It might as well be somebody just asking for a drink order or something. So he hasn't put in enough time. And again, remember we talked about the steps involved? He's still at the step like 1, like just an opener. He's not created any rapport. He's not really given her a reason to talk to him, because she's sitting there going, why should I talk to this guy? Why is he asking me this question? It makes little sense from a social standpoint. He's not being funny. He's not being interesting. He doesn't make her feel interesting. So, of course, her subconscious goes, this is weird. I'm leaving. And then he goes, well, this pattern stuff doesn't work. Well, it's because he's not using it correctly. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay, cool. Jean-Luc.
Okay, Robert was talking about a friend of his who, one of the first attempts that he used or said an incredible connection pattern.
Yeah.
Didn't turn out too great. Although I remember the first 2 times I ever used that pattern, I had astounding results. And so I want to bring that up and kind of analyze how did that happen? How does it work for some people and not for others? And I was certainly no master at it on a day.
Yeah. Well, when you say some people, not for others, the interesting thing is it works. The some people that's really pertinent in this instance is the woman, not necessarily you.
Totally agree.
Yeah, it just happened to be that at that moment, at that period of time, in that situation, she might have been in the frame of mind where she was thinking of that anyway. And then you walked up and said it. What's really funny, too, is that sometimes the guys that are really just getting started off with this stuff, it can work both ways. Sometimes they're so nervous and everything else that they get in their own way. Sometimes they're so removed from any real expectation of results. They're like, oh, I just learned this. Nothing's going to happen. Let's just give this a shot. And they just go blurt stuff out, and they get incredible responses because they're not all caught up in the results. They don't have all that energy of like, oh God, what's going to happen? What is she going to do? They're like, I don't know. I read this stuff and it said something about connections. Let me just go ask somebody and see what happens, because they're comfortable. They're relaxed. They have good energy. It's easy to get rapport. They don't expect too much, so they're not real needy. See how that all works with how her subconscious would perceive you? You walk up and go, you know what? Have you ever really felt connected with somebody? If she's in the right frame of mind, you might have a hit. And then again, that's what I get to with the random factor. You don't know where she is at that time of day and that point of her life. That's why it's one thing to know to say something like that. Because if you just walk up to enough people and say that, you're going to have some responses. But if you really understand the how and the why and the context of it, then you know to talk to somebody for a while, have sufficient rapport, and then get a sense of what they are going to respond to, and then go from there. That puts you in a much more flexible and much more powerful position ultimately.
this may be kind of outside the reach of our understanding, but is it possible that you could be very, very good at certain levels on the hierarchy of tools, and yet for whatever reason with a woman who could have been receptive, you just weren't really, just really connecting with certain kind of with a certain level on that hierarchy, and would not be as effective?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, again, with any of these skills, we're talking about increasing your chances and increasing your effectiveness overall, increasing your percentages, or however you want to look at it. But, there's sometimes it's just you and her don't mesh. Maybe the subjects that you are familiar with, that you can converse about, don't really mesh with what her interests are. This gets down to some of the aspects of chemistry and these sort of nebulous terms that people use. There may be, it just may be the time of the day or the time of the week or whatever. She might be tired. She might have just gotten bad news or something like that. So you never really know. And again, having flexibility and understanding puts you in a better position to work with that. But yeah, you could be an expert in certain areas, but she's able to respond in certain areas, but your areas don't match her areas. Does that make sense?
Sure. I guess that kind of leads also to another question I had about toolset hierarchy. Have you diagrammed this in order of importance or in order of power? Like more powerful and more important at the top of the hierarchy going downwards, or is it not set up that way?
It is in the sense that the person who is able to actively operate at a higher level tends to be in a better position of power. The things at the lower level, I almost hate saying terms like lower level because it makes it sound like they have less power or less significance. They don't necessarily. But if your head is totally thinking about, when do I touch her? When do I say this? Is my tonality right now? Do I need to use a weasel phrase right here? Do I need to use a transphrase right here? When do I use a poem, story? If you're thinking about that all the time, then you're not very powerful because your mind is your conscious mind. And so actively engaged in all those things that you're not aware of what's going on and what her responses are. Okay. The guys who tend to be the most powerful are the ones where their mind is most actively engaged at the higher levels. They're sitting there thinking about, where are they going? Where is she at the process? Is their frame of mind correct? Okay. Are they in the correct state? That sort of thing. So all of them are important. It's not necessarily about power, but where your mind is actively operating tends to indicate how powerful you are. Look at one extreme or the other. The guy who is sitting there thinking, boy, when do I touch her? When do I use a transword weasel phrase? Well, compare his level of power with somebody who just lives the life of a guy who women are interested in, or who is charismatic or persuasive in general. Okay. That shows you that second guy is much more powerful. He may still use the other tools, but he leads a more powerful life. Does that make sense? A little bit different context, but it kind of explains what I was getting at with that. Okay, more questions about the tools hierarchy, Jean-Luc?
Sure. You've sprinkled quite a lot of processing language in this CD or in this product. But I'd like to hear more so that I can really immerse myself and have it be more obvious, because I have not developed an ear yet to really hear all the processing language. So, where can I find some real obvious examples?
Well, there's different things. I mean, once you sort of learn this stuff and get the understanding, you're probably starting to notice already there's a lot of it in advertising, things like that, ad copy. Other products that you've already bought, like Ross Jeffries or others, you're going to notice a lot of it in there. This product as well. But I kind of get the feel one of the things you're getting at is you're looking specifically for a lot of examples of that language, because it is one of those more difficult hurdles. It's almost like there's a big soup of all these techniques and everything else, and you just need to listen to it so much over and over so that it just becomes a part of your subconscious and you find yourself speaking this way. I am planning some things in the future that are specifically going to address that. I mean, this product is to give you an understanding of what to do, somewhat about how to do it, but I think when it comes to that process language, you're going to need examples. There's some of them out there that you can find. I plan on working on some things that are just going to give you tons of examples over and over, so that if you're the sort of person and you believe that that's what you need, there's going to be some resources out there for you as well. Okay, with that question behind us, the one thing I really want to move on to now is the speed seduction process, the overall steps that you take someone through, that you go through yourself, and achieving the kind of results that you want. I think that's one of the things where we really start to see different aspects of all these learnings and understandings come together. I wanted to see if you guys had questions on that, the different steps individually, examples of people or situations that you wanted to have explained. Does anybody have anything on that part of the product that they want to talk about? And Marcus, you got a question?
Yeah, Dave. I noticed on, I believe it's step 3, where you were talking about the conversational framework. My question is, where does eliciting values come into play, and how important is that in the process?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, generally it comes in step 3, and you think of eliciting values. Again, this is, once again, we're hitting the product on multiple levels. We're going back. We're not only looking at step 3 of the process, but we're going to look back at the mind map, okay, the structure of the mind. When you're eliciting values, what are you doing? You're asking her in some ways to give you information about her subconscious and the way she categorizes things, okay? You're looking for her values and what she holds for herself as ways for her to feel good or feel excited or feel comfortable or whatever. So, now, in the context of step 3, okay, if you're going to elicit values, let's think about this. If you're going to elicit values and you really want to get that information that's about her and her subconscious and those values that really mean something to her, you're obviously going to have good rapport, because she's going to need that rapport for her subconscious to feel comfortable in providing that information to you. So hopefully by the time you're at step 3, you've got enough rapport. She finds you interesting enough or compelling enough so she's talking to you. That's step 2. And at step 3, you're at the point where you've got that rapport carried into step 3, and she's going to open up and provide that sort of information. Okay. Now, with the knowledge that you now have of her subconscious, remember what her subconscious is looking for: safety and security. That might manifest itself as excitement or thrills or whatever, but you understand basically what the subconscious is looking for. Then you're asking for those values, and you're saying, how does she think of those terms? What values does she hold true? What is her subconscious looking for in terms of evaluating what she wants to have in her life? Okay. Now when you look at step 3 in that context, you get more of an understanding, because I think values become confusing to a lot of guys because they seem to come out of thin air. Oh, this value, that value. But now when you look at values in the context of the understanding of the subconscious mind, those values make a lot more sense. The values might talk a lot about roles. They might talk a lot about, when she describes them, she's going to use a lot of process language. The values tend to not necessarily have anything associated with time. They're going to have things like her feelings and feeling a certain way about somebody. She's going to talk about safety and security in some fashion. So the values take on a whole new level of understanding for you when you understand them in the context of the way the mind works. Does that make sense?
So are these quote unquote her trance words?
Well, the trance words would be, her values are the things that she holds true and holds important in her subconscious. When she's describing them, the words that she may use to represent those things would be associated with her trance words. Okay? She will use her trance words to some degree in her description of what her values are. And again, remember how vague languaging can tend to, bring the subconscious into it. Her subconscious is what's doing the interpretation of the vague languaging, if you will. So what she's saying is, there's certain words that tend to key into certain feelings for her, and they may key into certain values for her. So if you've got rapport, you're step 3, you're asking about her values, she used certain words, okay? You use those words back, then you're just reinforcing those values and those sort of feelings. Does that make sense?
And you're increasing rapport.
You're increasing rapport, right. If you get her to feel those certain feelings, then there's other steps involved, like we talked about before, where you find a way to associate those feelings to you and amplify them. And let's be honest. If she's feeling those feelings and having them in your presence, just by virtue of those facts alone, she's going to start to associate them with you. Because she's looking at you. She's listening to you. You're talking. She's experiencing them in your presence. So just by virtue of being in the room when it's going on, you're going to become associated with them to some extent. And the more you do that, the longer you do that, the more rapport you have when you do that, the better things get and the more dramatic results you can have. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Great. Connor, you had a question.
Yeah, once you've internalized what these steps are, and you know what to do and how to do it, then it becomes more about where are they at, where's the woman at, and calibrating and it's good your attention is more outwardly focused, but okay, what am I looking for then? What are some signs? I think my question is about timing, really.
Right. To go you're saying from one step of the process to another?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I wish there was an exact answer. That's one of the things I remember when I was working on the product before, trying to define, how long does step 1 last? And I'm saying things like 15 seconds to 1 minute. And then step 2 might be anywhere from, a minute to 5 minutes. I mean, it's very hard to define. It's more about when are you ready to go to the next step with her?
What is she giving you?
What
are her signs that you can see and sense that lets you know when to go from step 2 to 3? Yeah.
I think it's a sense, what I perceive is a sense that it's not necessarily something leading me to the next step. It's a sense of completion of the previous step. I hate to have like a reverse frame or a reverse view, but I tend to think it's time for me to move to step 2 when I'm really satisfied that I've done step 1 completely. So I'm not looking for how do I jump to step 2. I look at, am I pretty sure that I'm done with step 1? And let me give you an obvious example. I think what trips a lot of guys up is from step 2 to step 3. Step 2 is you've given her a reason to want to talk to you and a reason to want to stay around. And step 3 is you're really starting to lead her in a specific direction, lead the languaging and everything in a specific way. A lot of guys look at it and say, God, how quickly can I make step 3 happen? Is it soon enough to go to step 3? Can I get there now? I tend to look at it in other ways. Have I done step 2 so effectively so that I know it's there? Do I know she really wants to talk to me? Do I have the sense that if I did pull away, that she'd probably either follow me or be a little bit disappointed or wanted me to come back to her at some point during the evening? When I get that sense, that's when I kind of know to go to step 3. Now, the difficulty in defining it is that the specific definitions tend to be pretty unique to every situation. You know what I mean? It's like depending on whether, from step 2 to step 3, for example, depending on whether we're at a party would be different from if we're at a club or whether we're on the phone or
whether it's her by herself or her and a group of friends.
Exactly.
Or if it's the first meeting or the second meeting. You may have to go backward. You may have to redo some steps on the second meeting.
Right. That's an excellent point because guys tend to think, well, I was at step 2 and then I got her phone number and now I'm going to start right over again at step 3. And it doesn't really work that way. These are not distinct. That's a great thing to bring up because they're not distinct steps in terms that, you are immediately from step 2 and then you jump to step 3. They tend to be overall aspects of a process. There's some overlap. And again, remember fractionation, how you're jumping from one thing to another. You may be at step 2 and be very funny and interesting, let's say, and you do some step 3 stuff using some of the languaging, etc. And then you sort of jump back to stuff that almost looked like step 2 because you're being funny and interesting again, or being humorous. So you're right. It's kind of the dividing line is not a firm thing, but it's not about time and it's not about specific signals. For me, it tends to be, am I very comfortable in the fact that I've completed the previous step? So I'm pretty serious that I can move on to the next one and be secure. The hardest one to define probably for a lot of guys is going from step 3 to step 4. And that's why I try to give guys some information about doing test closes, doing things that sort of lead into the fact that you may be making a move physically. Not only does it tend to make things more effective because you're fractionating and you're getting her used to the fact that you're near her physically, but it tends to be a way for you to test how close you are to that line, because nobody's a mind reader. Nobody knows exactly when the exact moment is best, but at least it gives you some insight if you have some ways to do some testing. Does that kind of help?
Yeah. I'm still wanting, is there some
12 minutes and 37 seconds.
I mean, there's a light flash on her forehead. It's like I want something more that I can see or that my subconscious can learn to pick up better.
Right. One succinct way is, are you sure that the previous step is, don't look at it as, am I sure I can get to the next step? I tend to look at it as, am I sure the previous step is done? The other thing about it that tends to happen is, and I don't mean to be nebulous about this, but it does really work. Remember, half of this product is you being familiar with your own subconscious and your own training. You do really start to get this sense of, like, you probably had instances where you were with a woman and you just kind of had a sense of, you knew when to go to step 4. You just kind of knew, right?
Sure.
Now, if I tried to ask, you, Connor, to describe to Marcus or Robert or Jean-Luc exactly how did you know, you couldn't define it exactly. You just kind of knew. It's kind of nebulous, but it holds. The more you do this sort of stuff, the easier that sort of stuff becomes. Because what's going to happen is your subconscious is going to pick up on all the little signals and all the little stuff that's going on. And if you're sitting there and you're relaxed and you're enjoying what's going on, you are going to get that sense that it's time to go to the next step. It's not an exact thing. It's not something 1, 2, 3, or 4 senses are going to see. It's something that's going to be perceived in a lot of different ways. And if you've done it enough, have enough familiarity, your subconscious is going to give you a signal, just like it has in the past, to let you know when it's time to go from step 3 to 4, for example. Does that help?
Yeah. Much better. Yeah.
Okay, good. I hope it does. Robert, you look like you had some questions about the steps and some examples, maybe.
Yeah, Dave, what I was thinking about is one of my friends, he's really good at picking up other women in bars and nightclubs.
Okay.
And we've talked and hung out and sarged together a whole bunch. His advice of his frame and his model is that women have a lot of, quote, shields on in the clubs.
Mm-hmm.
They're used to being hit on nonstop over and over and over again when they're real pretty. And all the guys have liquid confidence, so to speak. So what he is advised doing is to maybe ask like a light opinion about something.
Right.
He'll be playful. He'll convey his personality. His big thing is never ask a question, though, of anything, of what you do, where you live.
Don't ask her anything, right?
Anything, because it's kind of, if you think about like the bum saying, I'm interested in you, and she will have her shield go up if she sees no reason to be interested in you back before she gets to know you. She's looking at you and like, well, you're interested in me because of my looks and nothing else. And you're interested in me because you're really drunk right now. So it's not something to do. With all that going on of not asking questions, how does that fit in all of this? How do you see that?
Well, I think what he's doing, he's describing one aspect of an overall approach for him. Again, his overall approach is based on who he is, what his personality is, what he looks like, where he's going, what he could talk about, the themes that mean something for him. And, in fact, he's meeting him in bars. Okay. Now, when he takes something out of context and says, don't ask them questions, that's what he does that works for him. But, let's just look at that one statement. Don't ask them questions. Look, there's different ways that you can ask somebody questions. Okay. If you're asking someone a question and you really are doing it to get their approval or to impress them or something like that, that's probably not a very good thing in that context of a bar. But if you're just asking them a question in a matter-of-fact way, that's nowhere near as bad. I mean, obviously it's different to ask a woman to go, oh, God, do you think I look really good in this shirt? That's different from asking a woman in a bar, which way is the men's room? Okay, so you can ask her which way the men's room is, and that's probably not going to break his whole system. So to say don't ask him anything is probably not correct. But I think one of the big things is, and you really hit it in some ways, is that in a bar, any reasonably attractive woman is getting bombarded with guys hitting on them. So one of the most important things you need to do in that context is the whole thing about social proof. You don't want to make it seem like you're just another guy. You don't want to seem like you're overwhelmed by her good looks. You don't want to seem like you're intimidated at all by her. So that's why guys sort of sometimes go out of their way to seem a little bit aloof, to seem as if, they're not terribly impressed by the way she looks. Because every other guy is. Every other guy is so impressed by the way she looks, so much wanting to talk to her, so much wanting to impress her, that all he's trying to do is to find a way to stand apart and stand separate from that. Does that make sense? Yeah, so the other guys are finding, God, how am I going to talk to her? How am I going to get her attention? How am I going to do step 2, which is be interesting enough to get her to talk to me? Oh, I'll ask her questions. That'll work. Well, she's heard that so many times that she sort of has an automatic response mechanism to it. Okay? Again, remember the roles in terms of the structure of the subconscious? She's used to guys falling into a certain role in that situation. The role of, he's just another guy that wants to get in my pants. So when a guy walks up and starts asking questions, typically she's going to put him into that role. Now, he is right in some sense that if there's a bad role, you want to avoid the bad role. And so if a guy's going to walk up and fall into a role of just another guy in the bar asking me questions, you want to avoid that. But you can be in a bar, and if you're the right guy in the right frame of mind, you can ask her questions. You just can't come across as just every other guy who wants to get in her pants. So what he's doing is he's finding a way around that. What's he doing? He's being different. He's building up social proof by his stories. Some guys will successfully talk to different women throughout the bar so that they're seen talking to different women throughout the bar to build up social proof. He appears to not be trying to impress anyone because he's not asking them anything, not asking for their approval. And this all works in his favor. So for him, he doesn't need to ask questions. Again, for his reality, that will hold true. For somebody who's only seen, fast cars that are red, in their reality, painting your car red makes your car go fast. So in that context, maybe what he's saying is true for him. I just don't think that saying never ask a woman a direct question is the best overall approach to take. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay, great. All right, Robert, you had another question?
Yeah, I've seen a few guys in bars and a few nightclubs, and they're basically dressed like a pimp or a clown. They look hysterical. And I even had to go up and ask them, well, what's up? Why are you dressed like this? And they're like, well, I'm dressing to stand out because I want to attract attention and everything else. And this is why I do it. It does look a little funny, I know, but it gets me attention. That's why I like doing it. What's your whole take on all that?
Does it get them the right kind of attention? I mean, I think that can work in a context. I actually I've heard the word or the term peacocking. I don't mind saying it because I used the term 4 years ago because I've gone to the zoo. And zoo, one place I've lived, when you first walk in the front door, the first display after you walk in is a peacock exhibit. And the funny thing about peacocks is the way the men, the male peacocks attract is they put out their feathers and they just simply walk around with this attitude of look at me, look at me, look at me. Okay, hoping that the female, right? And that's what these guys.
I've got the biggest feather.
Yeah, I've got the biggest feather. But the way I talked about the peacock syndrome, which is guys on dates sitting there saying, well, this is the kind of car I drive and this is where I work and this is what I do and this is how much money I make. And I talked about the peacock syndrome in that context of a guy trying to impress her in those sort of ways. Okay. But what you're talking about in bars, look, I understand to some extent you want to get attention and that's fine. But is it the right kind of attention from the right kind of people and for the right reasons? And here's the thing. If you're the kind of guy and you have the personality and everything to back up that kind of look, great. Do it. Let it work for you. That'll be fantastic. Now, if you're not quite that type of guy and you don't have that personality, then don't dress that way. Because the saddest thing in the world is a guy who's dressed up like that, who's trying to act that part, but it's not him. Because what will happen is the woman will walk up and talk to him for about 10, 15, he'll get attention. But, I'm sorry, like a burning car on the side of a freeway gets attention. Okay. The fat lady at a carnival gets attention. Okay. I mean, there's ways to get attention, but it's not the right kind of attention. And the saddest thing, I mean, you've probably seen it, are these guys, we talked about that example of the homeless person who's walking up and before he opens his mouth that he's going to want to ask you for money. If you ever been to a bar or a nightclub and you see somebody who's really dressed up and you just know that that's not him, I mean, have you seen that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's the saddest thing in the world. And women see that far off, and they see it as sort of this cartoonish kind of presence. Now, if you are that guy, if you can dress up like that and you have the personality and you can do that and you can back it up, great. And remember, in terms of the steps, look, that might help you with step one. And it may give you some reason for her to talk to you and spend some time to you. Step two. I mean, she'll, who made that clothes or why did you do? But if you don't have something to keep her attention at step two and some way to move into step three, then she sees you as this guy who had some interesting clothes. Okay. Because let's face it. I mean, after, what are you going to do? Talk about the clothes for 30 seconds or something like that. If you don't have a personality, if you don't have anything to back it up more than that, it's not going to work. And the saddest thing in the world is somebody who's trying to be something he's not. Does that make sense? Jean-Luc, you look like you had a question about the about the steps and the structure, or maybe something overall. Go ahead.
It's kind of an overall question.
Okay.
I remember seeing one of Ross's products where he talks about basically the true coin of the realm, that speed seduction and the kind of connection that a man can build with a woman by using these tools is something that a woman, really, really wants on a very deep level, more so than Manny beefcake guy, can offer her with the convertible and the shiny teeth. But, obviously on a certain kind of sheer physicality level, a woman is being, very fulfilled by those things too. So, looking at what you said about the subconscious and a woman's need for, safety and strength, I guess my question is, how do you bring all those things together to really give your fullest gift to a woman?
Okay. And that's an excellent question. And it really gets to all aspects of the things we've been talking about. This is really the context too, where I tell guys, look, you can use these things to find, different people that you want to go out with, that one special person. You can keep them, whatever you want to do, whatever's appropriate for you or whatever stage of your life. Let's look at things overall. It's a great overall question as well. Look, when you really understand the mind and how people work, when you really have an appreciation of women and of people on multiple levels, like with that mind map, look at what a woman is looking for. She's looking for that sense of safety and security. That can manifest itself as excitement, as, appreciating different things in her life, appreciating different roles. Imagine having that understanding of what she's looking for at a deep level, having her values, how she represents those things to herself. This really gives you the opportunity to address those in her life. It can be for different women that different friends, or maybe one person that you really have a special connection with. Okay. When you have that level of understanding, you know how to really make her happy. In some respects, maybe you're better able to do that than she is for herself, because you're understanding more things than most people, certainly most men do. When you look at the tools, remember, the tools aren't just about, this word here, this gesture there, and everything. The tools also address who you are and the life you lead, looking at things in a certain frame and being in a certain state. I'm not just talking about a frame of mind in terms of meeting a woman, or, a state in terms of, how you talk to her in an interaction. We're talking about, the frame in which you see all your interactions, your life, your career, your relationships, where you see yourself going with a woman, the life that you lead as a person, who you are in that life. If you look at your life in that way, you can really become, in a lot of respects, the sort of man that women dream about. Okay, and this really gives you sort of a roadmap, if you will, to get there. The thing I like about the structure and the steps, okay, at the final end of the product, is that a lot of guys think you do step, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you're done. If you're with somebody, the most interesting thing about an interaction between a man and woman over time is that what you should be doing really is that steps 2 and step 3 and 4 are kind of like a loop. I mean, when you meet somebody and you've done step 1, you've kind of done step 1. But imagine being so interesting and so funny and so make her feel so interesting that step 2 is just a part of what you normally do. Imagine step 3 being something that you do continuously to make her feel interesting or, compelled to be around you, to make her feel really turned on and interested and fascinated by you as a person. Imagine step 4 as being something you do over and over and over again. See, guys think I do step 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm done. I think that to really be that, the holy grail for her and to really have everything that she's looking for, look at it as something that you do continuously. That you're the man that just doesn't say, I got to step 4, I'm done, next. But maybe you're the sort of guy that says, I've got maybe one woman to step 4, and if I'm going to stay with her for a while, I'm going to go back and we're going to do step 2 and 3 and 4 over and over and over again. And if you're looking for somebody that's really going to be what you want and make your life interesting, I think that's the key, because you're showing her that you know how to do those sort of things. And you may just end up, being with somebody a lot longer than you thought previously, or having more of the wonderful types of experiences you've always wanted to have. Does that make sense?
I'm almost getting this image of steps, 2, 3, 4, being like, layers of an onion, and you kind of, you show layer 1 for a little while, and then when it's time, then you show layer 2,
right,
et cetera. Is that
That's true.
kind of analogous to what you're saying?
It is. And, it can happen rapidly, which is, the whole thing of speed seduction. It can happen rapidly. And one of the things is, it's with layers of an onion, it's not just something that happens once. It's not just 1, 2, 3, 4, you're done. You go back and you can do 2, 3, 4 again, 2, 3, 4 again, 2, 3, 4 again. And that's where you get into these relationships that really develop into something. I mean, that may be something that's appropriate for this time of your life. It may not. But again, just being the sort of guy that's aware of that makes you all the more compelling. The guy that really is, the who you are and the life you lead that women dream about is that guy that's aware of that sort of thing. That's what they dream about. Whether they get that with you or not is a whole other issue. But you really are the kind of guy that they've always wanted to be with, and that's the kind of life that you can have. And the more that you understand these concepts, the closer you get to that sort of life for yourself. Does that make sense? Great. I really want to take this time now to thank all you guys out there that bought this product and the guys here in this room. I feel they've given you a really good cross-section of the kind of questions, the kind of things, hopefully maybe I didn't cover too well in the product. Those things have been covered here by this great panel of guys asking questions. I also want to thank the sound engineer, Denver, who's helped us out tremendously in this product, and many other things as well. Hopefully, you've gotten everything out of this product that you wanted and more. And again, listen to it over and over. I hope that as we heard from Jean-Luc, it's like the layers of an onion. Keep peeling it. Listen to it over and over again. Make this just one step and one aspect of your life to make it even better and get the kind of results that you've always wanted. And I know that you can have. Good luck. Take care.